Hey everybody, it's Ashley, and today in the kitchen we are going to be canning chicken, home canned chicken. Home canned chicken makes such a great high protein dinner. It makes dinners quick and easy. It makes it super quick and easy to throw dinners together, and it is just a fantastic addition to our pantry shelves. This is something that we have previously purchased, and this is nothing in particular. It's nothing special. It's not organic. It's not, naturally raised or anything like that. It just is what it is. This is a 12.5 ounce can. And I figured, let's get our own canned chicken going. I've canned chicken before, and I'll link that video if you want to see it. I did a few extra things to make it kind of, I did it in larger jars. I used broth. And anyway, today we are canning chicken as simple as we can. Canning chicken and canning meat in general can be super, super simple. If you've never canned meat before, but are wanting to try it, chicken is a really great one to do because it cans really well if it is completely raw. I've canned beef before, lamb, and some other things that really do better, I think, if they're browned first. But chicken is great raw, which makes it incredibly simple. So today I want to show you all about how incredibly simple this process really is. We're canning chicken, which means we have our pressure canner out. Anytime you can meat in the United States, the United States Department of Agriculture recommends that you pressure can it. And basically all that means is that it gets it to a high temperature and it doesn't take as long, and you get a good seal in your jars. My canner holds 8 pints. I wish I had the taller one because then you can double stack them, but we've got 8 pints ready. You can find these types of canning recipes in a book like this, a book like this, a website like this, or a website like this. I will link all of the resources on where you can find tested recipes in the description box. Guys, canning meat, especially chicken, could not be easier. You don't even have to cook this. You don't have to cut it up. I like to cut it up, but you don't have to. You don't even have to take the bones out. You can literally can chicken or any kind of like wild game or poultry with the bones. You can add salt, but you don't have to. You don't even have to can it in broth. You can put chicken, raw chicken, just like this, in a jar, cover it with hot water, and get it in the canner. I've previously canned chicken with broth. I was thinking, it might be a great idea. I had this broth that was so good, but you know what? The chicken cooks in the canner, so the liquid that is in those jars when the chicken's done being processed is broth. Because I use my scissors to cut these open, I'm probably just going to cut up my chicken using the scissors. If you have a favorite knife you can use your favorite knife. My trick for having the jars nice and hot, ready at the correct temperature, is to put them in a 200-degree oven. That way, when I get this chicken in them, they are already hot and ready for my hot water. And all of like the jar, the water, the canner, it's all pretty much the same temperature. If things are not the same temperature, you can get cracked jars, which of course nobody wants. Always use a canning funnel. It saves such a mess. I'm just putting water in right now, so I'm not too concerned about it. But once I get going with the chicken, I'm going to use that funnel. That's one thing I've learned with canning meats is just toss a little bit of your broth liquid right in the jar at the bottom and then start filling your jar. That way the chicken doesn't kind of stick to the bottom. So we're just going to go ahead and get all these jars filled up. We want 1 inch headspace when everything's said and done. So with the chicken, I'll leave a little less than 1 inch headspace and then go ahead and fill the water all the way up to 1 inch. So just as a reminder, these are pint jars, which is the equivalent of two cups, which is the equivalent of 16 fluid ounces. The Costco chicken comes in 12 ounces. So these will actually give you slightly more chicken per container. It's always a good idea whenever you're canning, especially depending on what it is, things that might have bigger air pockets in there, to go ahead and what's called debubble. which means going around with some sort of utensil and just kind of pushing on the sides and loosening any bubbles that might be hiding in there. There are special tools that you can use that are plastic. I'm just really gentle when I use this butter knife because I know it's not plastic and I don't want to crack a jar. So I just go around and gently do that. Sometimes it brings up bubbles, sometimes it doesn't, but it's always a good idea to at least try. Now after we do that, it often brings the water level down ever so slightly, so you can go ahead and adjust the headspace one last time after doing the debubbling. I did overfill this one, so I'm just kind of using that first. I like to get down to the height of the counter just to make sure that my headspace is accurate, because if you're obviously standing from up top, it can be hard to tell if the headspace that you think you have is actually the headspace you have. So I try to do at least one eye level check before the jars go in the canner. Now what I'm going to do is wipe the rims clean using some really hot water in a paper towel. If I'm not dealing with meat, wow, I just burned my fan. If I'm not dealing with meat, I don't always use a paper towel. If I'm just doing jam or tomatoes or something like that, I will often just use a rag. Some people like to use wide mouth jars when they're canning meat. I think that especially if you're using quarts, that would be much more helpful. But for pints, I think this is probably just fine. It helps to be able to get a really good clean job on the jars, because as you'll see after these are canned, the meat can kind of stick to the edges. So it can really help wash if you have a nice wide mouth and you can get your whole hand in that jar. A little weird fact about my hands is my thumbs are actually double jointed, and so I have been able to get my hands in regular mouth quart jars, but I'm pretty sure I have injured it because of doing that repetitively in big canning sessions. So it's not something that I would recommend. Everything's ready to go. You just want to adjust your lids and rings to fingertip tight, and yeah, I'm using these Kerr lids. I use ball or Kerr lids typically. I know there's a lot of lids on Amazon that are made from other brands. I have not heard success or fail on those. I do actually have some wide mouth ones, so maybe I will give that a try and do like a side-by-side test. I've really never had big issues with lids of any kind, so I just kind of stick with what I have been using because it works. When you're processing in a pressure canner, you don't have the water up high like you do in a water bath canner. As you can see, it's pretty low in there. You put about 3 quarts of water in the canner, and that fills it to the line that it's needed, and it creates enough steam for the entire cycle through the canner. Now, one thing that's recommended is to put in a dash of vinegar, white vinegar, in with the canner. And what that does is it prevents the lids and rings from like discoloring a lot. So we'll see how they look at the end. Normally I do. Lately I've been forgetting, so I remembered this time, so I threw it in. Gonna go get the lid on, and we'll see these guys in a little bit. All right, we have jar sealing. We've got bubbles still happening. Whenever you pressure can something, you always want to make sure you take the lid off and let things kind of cool down while it's still sitting in the canner. Lid off. We do have some discoloration happening on the lids and rings, but it can be a lot worse. So I think I'd like to think the vinegar helped. So that's what we got. There we got another pop. We'll get this out in just a minute. Okay, I just got all of these out of the canner, and my last lid just sealed. So we got a seal on everything, which is great. Now, I did have a little bit of siphoning happening with one of the jars when I originally took the lid off. That can happen for a number of reasons. In the case of chicken or a meat product like this, that is going to happen with a temperature fluctuation. So in this case, they were still in the canner. I lifted off that lid and immediately one started kind of siphoning just a little bit. So I just put the lid back on and waited a little bit longer before taking the lid off. If it's going to be fruit or something like that, the siphoning happens for a different reason. But with regards to chicken, that is why that may happen. These things are just going to cool down overnight. Then I'm going to do a really good clean job on the jars after I remove the rings to get anything from that siphoning cleaned off and removed, and they look great. This is what canned chicken looks like. It's what canned chicken looks like in a tin can. It's what chicken looks like canned in a jar. It always looks the same. You can just see it because it's in glass, and glass is see-through in this case. After getting the jars nice and clean as well as dried, I make sure to write the contents and date on each lid. This is a great way to keep track of what's in the jar, when it was made, and also what batch it was made in. I've never ever had an issue with a jar of home canned food unsealing or spoiling, but if for some reason that did happen, I could know exactly which jars were canned at the same time and keep an eye on those jars. One of the things that I think is really important when canning, especially meat where it's not like a recipe, is to be able to know what kind of yield you get from your product. So I did just want to tell you quick what kind of yield we got out of this chicken. So we got 7 jars. And if you recall, I was hoping to get 8. I would have had to make my jars too small if I wanted to try to spread it out over 8 jars. Now, if you remember, this can of chicken from a store, which is a pretty large can, is 12.5 ounces. This is a 16-ounce jar, also known as a pint. I guess I could do a comparison and take out the chicken and see and weigh the chicken that's in here compared to the chicken that's in here. I might do that because I'm really curious to see how much of this is just liquid and this and all that kind of stuff. We got 7 jars and we had just over 6 pounds of chicken, which means each jar took a little bit more than a pound of chicken. So in terms of economy, this is it's pretty economical. I think that we got 6 cans for $11 or something like that. And for this, we got 7 cans. And I think the chicken ranges usually from $3.50 a pound to maybe $6 a pound, depending on if it's organic or not. So that's something to think about. You're going to be spending maybe a little bit more. I like knowing that my jar does not have any plastic in it where the food is touching. The lid does have a little plastic layer, but the food doesn't touch it. And it's not sitting in it the way that it is in a can. Because even though this is a can, there is a plastic lining in all cans. I really like having the ability to control what kind of chicken goes in these. That would be besides the plastic lining, that's my biggest thing with this, is just this is no particular chicken that's been raised in any way other than super conventional. So that was our yield. Thank you for coming along today as I show you how simple canning chicken can be. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a wonderful day. I appreciate you being here, and we will see you soon.